The AI world is full of challenges. On one hand, the regulators are challenged on what position to take. Do they embrace AI or do they take a passive stance and let it develop and then make a regulation? Then we have the EUA Act, which is creating some concerns amongst some companies. Then we have the transparency challenge with the technology coming up. How do you ensure privacy? How will it AI impact? What will blockchain do? And then there's also how can you use technology to create transparency, maybe? And then how do companies embrace AI? Do they adopt it because there's fear of missing out? Do they take a slow stance saying, don't use AI if we don't have to? What should they do? Well, all these are fascinating questions. And to talk about these, we have none other than Elena Gurevich, who's going to talk to us. She's a lawyer. She's fascinated by this technology world. She's in the IP world, AI world, and also with this blockchain. And then we are going to talk to her about all that. Let's go and talk to her.
Hello, and welcome to the Fit for Privacy podcast with Punit Bhatia. This is the podcast for those who care about their privacy. Here, your host, Punit Bhatia, has conversations with industry leaders about their perspectives, ideas, and opinions relating to privacy, data protection, and related matters. Be aware that the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are not legal advice. Let us get started.
So here we are with Elena. Elena, welcome to the Fit for Privacy podcast.
Hi, Punit. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you. And in your work, being a lawyer, what fascinates you or what attracts you towards this IT, IP, and blockchain world?
Forgot to mention one more magic word. I mean, two letters essentially AI, right? Because that's pretty much what everyone has been buzzing about for the past like a year and a half. I mean, I've been in into that a little more than that, but yeah, I mean, what's not fascinating about it, the blockchain and the AI space and how they intersect with intellectual property and what it means for digital art and intellectual property rights and digital arts provenance for that matter, how that all interplays and what benefits digital artists might how it might benefit digital artists
Mhm,
using blockchain technology when it comes to art provenance,
mhm,
digital art. I've known a lot of artists and I know a lot of artists, and there are a lot of initiatives out there to foster this culture of digital authenticity and provenance, and using blockchain technology as a means to do that. And I think it's fascinating, just pretty much some of the artists are trying to take the matters into their own hands, considering there's no real comprehensive legislation on the topic. And it's been there are a lot of interesting projects out there who are building this this structure, like how you can trace provenance, how you can trace the authenticity of that particular image, video, or sound
yeah,
recordings online. And yeah, that's fascinating. And as an attorney, obviously, that's very interesting topic to me.
for sure. So let's maybe go block by block. And when we talk about artificial intelligence, you talked about there's no comprehensive legislation. I know the adoption has of AI or embracing of AI has not that been great. Or
Yeah.
some countries are being very enthusiastic, proactive, some are being reactive. What's your view on that? What's happening in terms of adoption or evolution of AI, especially in terms of regulation? Of course, there's the EUAI Act, but that's a
Yeah.
separate thing. Rest of it, let's talk about that first.
Yeah. So yeah, obviously, when we're talking about comprehensive AI, piece of AI regulation, the EU Act comes to mind, which was just recently unanimously voted on by all the member states, and we're just very, very near to it being just into force right when it gets published in the official journal. And as for the rest of the world, I'm not talking about the EU right now. In the US, there's no such piece of comprehensive AI regulation. It's pretty much this, we have this patchwork of different bills and proposed bills and legislations that are very targeted. They're very specific, and each and every one of those proposed bills, they target particular issues that the authorities want to tackle when it comes to AI, be it elections or deepfakes and stuff like that. And yeah, kind of there's nothing, I would say, really fundamental. We have recently, just I think last week, the Colorado AI bill. So far, that I would say it's the most comprehensive of them all. That's targeting, again, specifically targeting algorithmic bias, and that's a very interesting piece of legislation. Again, it's very comprehensive and it addresses a lot of points, and by reading it, it kind of got a lot of very, very useful ideas from the AI Act. And yeah, it's going to be very interesting how it's going to be coming along. I believe it's supposed to come into force in February 2026. So yeah, definitely it's going to be interesting. But it's state by state, right? It's going to be the Colorado law. In other words, in New York, by that time there might be something else. So the states, in the absence of this comprehensive federal regulation, they're coming up with regulations of their own. And as usual, it goes just sideways at this point, and there's a lot of lobbying as well. A lot of people in the industry are not happy with this, and this lobbying is sometimes very successful. A few of the bills were taken down recently.
So lobbying
People
to get the law or lobbying to avoid the law?
lobbying to make these proposed bills as lax as possible.
Okay.
So the main idea is we don't want to impede um, we don't want to impede the research and our innovation. We want the US needs to be the first one in the world and all the stuff, and let's just not play with over regulating anything. So the main theme being just let's just leave this the way it is. Let's not interfere, and let's let the innovators innovate, I would say.
That's interesting because if we come to the EU side, there the
Mhm.
story is we want responsible innovation. That's the term they use. We want to foster innovation, but in a responsible and human centric way. And that's why they have come up with what we call the EU AI Act.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you would go about explaining it in 2, 3 minutes because it's comprehensive, as most people say it.
Yeah, yeah, it's a very comprehensive piece of legislation. If you want to get a sense of how comprehensive it is, you can read it. It's a lot of pages. Warning, a lot of pages. But yeah, it's a risk-based framework basically that addresses AI systems and puts them into different categories of risks: an acceptable risk, high risk, limited risk, and minimal risk. So it's depending on their use as well. So there are high risk applications, and where the EU AI Act imposes strict obligations on those high risk AI systems. That includes rigorous testing, documentation, and oversight. And there are, of course, transparency and accountability requirements as well for AI operators, for AI developers and deployers. The EU AI Act also bans certain AI practices altogether. That's the being so real-time biometric identification, social scoring. There are a few exceptions to that as well, and we can talk about it later. But overall, it's a very, very comprehensive piece of legislation that I think a lot of people are saying it might have the Brussels effect, as they say on other countries, and the way they tackle this problem, the problem of regulating AI space. But I guess we'll see, because like we already mentioned, that it's just been voted on, and it's going to be coming into force kind of in stages, and by 2026 it'll be in force completely. So again, we'll see how it's going to go, and the AI office will be the one in charge, sort of, to enforce those rules and obligations. So it's going to be very interesting how things going to unfold. Definitely exciting times.
Absolutely. I think the risk based approach and not asking each and every system to comply with each and every one requirement, that's a unique and an interesting one. And let's see how other countries look at that. But if you broadly categorize, I think about 50 to 60%, maybe 70% of systems can be in the low risk or the no risk category, and hence escape away with light obligations.
Or at least they'll try to get into that category, kind of.
Yeah, that's also, they will try to get into that category. That's true.
It's going to be essential for them
Yeah.
to do that. Or some of them might just choose not to do business in the EU altogether. I mean, depending on the company, right, and on its size, considering what the compliance with the act entails in terms of, even, I'm not even saying staff, but just in terms of money, right? It's complying with the act is it's going to cost companies a lot of money, and depending on the size of the company, some companies might even just be considering, if it's a small company, right, do we even need to kind of roll out our services in the EU market, so we don't need this sort of extra trouble. And I've already heard a few conversations like that from the uh, small startup
Hmm.
founders. So, kind of people are considering this as well. So
No, there are
definitely.
always companies like that. I know some websites are not available in Europe because of GDPR, because they don't want to take the extra effort of complying with the EU GDPR, and same thing can happen for UA Act.
Yeah.
But then, if we look at broadly speaking, AI creates a lot of challenges. And to address those challenges, you need some sort of a set of rules, guidelines to handle it. And that's where the EU AI Act, or even the Colorado AI Act comes in, and maybe
Yeah.
many more, because New York is already talking about an AI. We don't know what form or shape it will come. They have some, what do you
In New
say,
York,
order already.
yeah, yeah. In New York, we have this local law 144. That's just this weird name that they have for it. But yeah, it came into force last July, actually, and it concerns uh, using AI in the workplace in terms of hiring people, hiring and firing, using AI in HR, and screening through resumes and stuff like that. So the companies, they are obligated under this law to do the yearly audits and to publish the results of those audits. But again, as always, the companies will find their loopholes, just anything and everything under the sun to be able to kind of get away with as much as they can. So what they've been doing, and that's been a few already reports out, fascinating read, by the way. So there are companies who actually take the time and do the research, and they go over the audits and the results of those audits for the companies in New York. It turns out a lot of companies, they do the audits, but they never publish the reports, or they publish them, but they publish them, they put them somewhere on the website, in such an inconspicuous place where an ordinary consumer person who uses that on the website, they will never find them. And again, there's nothing in the law that says, there are no instructions, or there's nothing specific in terms of where you should place or where you should put that report for all the people to read. So it's interesting how the companies are kind of going about that again. So yeah,
Yeah,
fun times.
it is fun times because that even though GDPR was clear or the privacy laws are clear, you need to put a privacy notice. I was yesterday browsing website and they were saying privacy notice, which is how it should be in the footer. You go there and there are three: privacy policy, digital privacy notice, and California privacy notice. Now, for a normal user, that one step of clicking privacy notice was enough, and now you're given them three options, and
Yeah,
somebody will be like, okay, which one do I read? The digital privacy policy, the privacy notice, or California? Maybe somebody from California would choose that one, but still you're given others two options,
yeah,
and the content of both of them was very different. So in EU AI Act or AI audits, that option to hide always remains for those who want to hide or create confusion. But talking about the challenges we were talking, because that's why we need the law. One of the things is AI, at least the new AI that we are talking about these days, that can generate content, that can aggregate content with LLMs and everything. And then I'm curious to ask you, from your IP background, who would have the rights to the content that's generated or created or even
mhm,
aggregated? Because
yeah.
usually we expect it to be aggregated over the web, but sometimes it's one source. But who has that copyright and how does that copyright work?
So to answer your question in very simple terms,
Mhm.
depends on the jurisdiction at the moment, because different countries are approaching this very differently. Take China, for
Mhm.
example, right? The recent court's decision that an AI generated image deserved to be registered. Yeah, so the court awarded copyright registration to an AI generated image, which is very interesting. And base the basis was the reasoning was pretty much that the person who created the image using generative AI they were working with different prompts. There were different iterations, so they were actually doing some work, and there was actually some creative input from that person, right? There was no simple pushing the button type of thing and that's it. So that's interesting the way they approached that. But when it comes to the US, and I'm based in the US, uh, the stance is still the same. If you're not human, you are the work cannot be copyrighted in any way, shape, or form. If you are a
Mhm.
monkey and you took a selfie, you cannot later copyright that work. Or if you are a celestial being and you wrote a book or something like that to that effect, you cannot copyright that work as well. It has to be a human. There has to be some modicum of creativity, and it has to be um, it has to be either it has to be fixed in a tangible medium. It has to be, I don't know, I written a song, or I wrote a poem and I printed something out, or I drew something on a napkin, right? In any type of fixing that would consider be it. But the bar is pretty low actually. So modicum of creativity, how creative something can be, right? That's subjective also. But the fact still remains. It has to be a human author, and we've had recently several decisions by the U.S. Copyright Office that rejected copyright registration by artists who claimed that AI was supposed to be the author and the creator of the work, and their copyright registrations were filings were in effect rejected. So yeah, that's where we stand with the U.S. In the UK, things are different. In the UK, as far as I know, you can, in fact, copyright a work generated by a computer, and that's very interesting. But again, the UK kind of has been positioning itself as this industry favorable country, right? We are favoring AI, and we have a few companies that the UK has. We do not want to impede progress and all that. So they've been on this. I wouldn't say not even on the fence. Is that even like a word? But
Mm,
they are kind of, they've been very cautious to jump into this regulation fray. I would say the way everybody's been talking about the EU, the way the EU has, right? Because some of the people who are opposed to AI regulation, that's exactly what they've been talking about. It's kind of just like the UK, I'm sorry, the EU is just shooting themselves in the foot with this legislation, and they won't have any progress, and blah 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 blah. So people are lamenting the industry will die. Very, very dramatic, and which is in fact isn't true at all. And I think it's a very good thing that this piece of legislation has passed. So we'll see how it evolves later on. But obviously, a lot of lawsuits, a lot of interesting stuff will be coming out in the future. So definitely, it's going to be interesting to see how it works.
I
But
would
coming
agree.
back, I'm sorry.
I would say I would agree. It
Yeah,
depends on how it evolves, and we will have to see how the future brings, because at the moment it's a bit confusing for people and also the legislation perspective, because there was a copyright law which was very clear. Now there's the AI generated content which was never foreseen in that copyright law, and hence the confusion. But that'll exist even for product laws, quality laws, safety laws, everything, because none of those laws or legislation is meant for self generated or auto generated content,
yeah,
and doesn't cater to the soft aspect of it. It was always the physical product for which you will have safety aspects. Now, how do
yeah.
you ensure safety of a software product, or the LLM that is used by somebody? How do you ensure safety of that? Because how? So that's going to be a fascinating world in next say 10 to 20 years.
Yeah, definitely. And precisely because of this reason, it's very interesting how, when we're talking about risk and harms of AI, right, and risk mitigation, how can you mitigate the risk when we're talking about open source AI systems, right, or open weight as they're called? How can you possibly be aware of how the downstream deployers, like how the downstream users, how everyone is using that technology? You really can. But what I've seen, and what the latest AI report says, that essentially open weight AI systems have been on the rise, and obviously it's available to everyone. This technology is available to developers to build on top of, right? And considering that we are on this trend that AI models are starting to be implemented on the edge, right, on personal devices of people, how do you control that without being invasive, right? We're talking about people's privacy and all the implications of that. How do you control what people do on their own devices with that AI system, provided they might use it for nefarious purposes? But how do you control that without being invasive? That's the question.
That's for sure, because whether it was GDPR or whether it's AI Act or whether the any other digital act that's coming up, the intention of the regulators is to bring a sense of control to the human around their data, and also the actions around their behavior or actions impacting them. And so some of us call it responsible, some of us call it human centric, some call it transparency. And how do you see that transparency coming up in coming years? Because AI, as we say, will come up more and more.
Yeah.
Then privacy would be an issue more and more. And then we have technologies which are coming up, for instance, blockchain. So how can these technologies help assist in creation of that transparency culture or responsibility culture?
Well, considering the AI AI systems and AI in general, right? It cannot exist without data. The more data an AI model ingests, the better the AI model is, right? The better the output is, and not even the more data, the better that data is. Depends on the quality again and the diversity of that data. But again, data privacy issues, data protection will be at the forefront 100%. A lot of different issues already coming up. In terms of transparency, I've spoken about it recently. There's been another report published, AI Transparency Foundation Models Transparency Index by Stanford University researchers, and the transparency trend, again, it's on the rise. A lot more companies than back in October of 2023. A lot more companies are more willing to come up and be upfront with their transparency practices. So they've been publishing a lot more resources and a lot more reports on their transparency practices, and that's very good, and we welcome that. But again, a lot of things just didn't change and stay the same in terms of companies, again, and they still are not willing to share any details of the data they've been training their models on. They're not willing to share any type of copyright copyright data, if the fact that they even used some of the copyright data, which obviously it was, considering the amounts of data that these models are being trained on. So a lot of issues are still the same, but again, there's this slight uptick in this transparency, willingness to be transparent, at least on that front. So that's good. When it
But
comes
can
to, yeah,
the blockchain help create more transparency? Is that possible?
well, how blockchain works, right? The blockchain is just this ledger that creates, whenever you are putting something on the blockchain, it creates this hash that's just you cannot really forge it or change it or do anything with it, right? So it's a great resource for tracking when it comes to provenance of the work, when we're talking about art, right? So if it's on blockchain, you can trace any action or any step in the creation and just existence of that work on chain, like on the blockchain, from the moment of its creation, right? And that's very good in terms of artists who work with digital art and NFT owners, for sure. I was just dropping some NFT words out there. Everybody forgot at this point what that is, right? But yeah, I've been to the NFT NYC recently in April in New York, and a lot of people were talking about that. Actually, AI was obviously on the agenda, but people were more concerned how these two spaces can coexist. What can they bring to each other? How can we use AI when we work on the blockchain, and vice versa? How can blockchain help some aspects of AI risk mitigation that we're talking about, right? And there are people out there who are working on that, and that's an interesting space as well. So I would say these two were made for each other, in terms of they complement each other, right? When we're talking about tracing and tracking, and how can you make sure that work is the original work that wasn't AI generated? Because obviously we have a lot of companies rolled out their own watermarking techniques, right? Detecting AI generated work and detecting synthetic content. But again, those are not foolproof. They
No.
don't work 100% all the time. A lot of those times these systems don't work at all. We have a lot of I heard a lot and read a lot of stories about people who were accused of using, for example, ChatGPT, right, to write their essays, entrance essays to college, and all that sort of things, which was in fact not true, and they were labeled as just those people, basically, uh, who did that, and the outcome was some people didn't get into college. Some people lost their uh, I don't know, position as a student in college. There were real life consequences to that, and we need to think of ways how can we ensure that there's no, there are no cases like that anymore, because obviously it's happening, and it's been happening in real time, in real life, and it's serious. It has serious consequences. It just affects people's lives.
So you're talking about, normally we talk about plagiarism, that is somebody has used AI to produce content which is not their own to get some advantage, like admission into a university or submitting an assignment.
Mhm.
However, somebody wrote their own content, did not use AI,
Yeah.
and they were accused of plagiarism, of
Yes.
using AI, which
It,
is not the fact. So it's
exactly.
false
Yeah. Because
plagiarism, as we call it.
apparently a lot of maybe not a lot, but some of the professors or whoever that was, they were using these AI tools that help you detect 100%, right? They help you detect AI generated content, and these tools were in fact not correct at that point. And here we come up on the issue of liability, right? So who's at fault if I'm that student who just got rejected and I didn't get to the college that I wanted to get into just by the mere fact that the AI tool, detection tool, stated that I was using AI, which in fact I wasn't, right? Who am I going to complain about? The AI company, the developer of that tool, the professor who used that tool, all of them? It's just it's interesting. The university, the state, and those issues need to be addressed as well, because obviously the person's life has been changed drastically, and that people
Yeah,
might need some, have some means of resolution,
I think
which they
that's
don't have at
where
the moment.
the EU rights, like right to be not subjected to automated processing, and also understanding that these tools which allow you to detect plagiarism or AI use are good but not good enough. It's like the weather. You say it'll rain, sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't, and most time it's right. So same way, the tool is 70, 80, maybe 90% right, but it's not 100% right. So
Yeah.
when somebody is being, let's say, accused that this is plagiarism or this is false, this is using some means, then it should not be an automated decision saying, okay, the tool says, then it's the responsibility of the person to intervene and maybe have two or three persons check in and then make a decision rather than completely rely on tool, like you were talking the New York Act asking
Yeah.
in terms of hiring and firing not to rely only on AI. So that's the same thing in hiring of students or firing of or not hiring students. You need to apply that judgment, and that will remain, I think, in the AI world more and more because there is technology, it can do a lot of things, but only with a certain amount of accuracy, and that's where the human factor comes in and
Yeah.
human oversight comes in.
Exactly, but as a I don't like this word, but as a species, right? The humans, we are, for some reason we tend to over rely on technology, right?
Yeah.
Versus me versus you. I would rely more on my calculator on my phone to tell me what's kind of when I'm trying to figure out what's the sum of like those numbers, right? Versus you telling me, or a certain amount of information that just we're predisposed and just believing this technology. It's been I've read some research papers on that as well. People are they trust videos on the computer that they see more than just something that they saw with their own eyes at some point, and this kind of game, like the mind games, like their own mind is basically playing on them. And it's very interesting. So this tendency of people to over rely on this technology. So if AI told me that, if ChatGPT wrote that, it's in fact true, and that's where critical thinking comes into play.
Yeah.
It's never been more important to pretty much question everything you see and hear when you're on the internet, when you're online. you need to check and triple check every single source at this point. Yes, it's time consuming, and a lot of people don't have time and don't want to waste time. But when talking about attorneys, for example, right, everybody heard about this case, the Avianca case, where the attorneys just submitted they cited a bunch of cases in the court docs that were just made up by ChatGPT. And the cutest part of this case is the best part, that I love this part, when the attorney asked ChatGPT if those cases existed, if this was correct. And ChatGPT, of course, it responded, yes, they are
Yeah,
correct.
that's the worst
Everything
part.
is true. And it's just mind boggling to me.
Yeah. But that's where we need to be cognizant of the fact that AI or any other tool is there to assist us, but not to be trusted blindly. And that takes me to a kind of final question saying, if somebody or some company is grappling with this challenge of, on one hand, they want to go innovation, business centric, and more customers, more revenue. On the other hand, they hear about this new legislations in Colorado, in EU, and many others, thinking, I think we can be responsible, or maybe we need to take cognizance of these laws, or maybe we need to be looking at some framework. What would you advise them?
I would first tell them, ask yourself a question. If you can get to where you want to be by not using AI in the first place, if
Mm-hmm.
there's any other way for you to get where you want to be, just think about it, think it through, because this FOMO is great. Everybody's scared to be second.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's scared to miss on something. Even I'm scared. You don't read your emails for 2 days straight. You don't read any news, right? For some reason, I don't know. You've been in a cave somewhere. You don't read that, and 2 days later, you have this still, and I'm still. You trying to catch up. You constantly trying to stay on top of things, which is impossible. So at some point,
Yeah.
I just told myself, just let it go. So that would be my first advice: just let it go and think objectively. Don't think about I need this and that, because this FOMO might cost you your business money, actual money, when you're trying to integrate the technology you don't really need.
Yep.
And a lot of businesses have faced that and lost, so you need to be cognizant about that. And when it comes to customer service, if you especially when you're dealing with your customers data, you need to be very cognizant about data privacy issues, right? Because a lot of people are just uh, blatantly saying, well, for example, mm, I have this tool, I'm planning to roll it out. It'll just process people's blood results, right? Just blood work, something like that, medical tests, and that's it. That's not private information, right? We're safe. We don't have to do anything. Of course you're not. What do you mean? What? It's just the way some people are thinking. It's really, again, it's not even funny. It's just it's scary at this point. The way companies are they are quick to jump into this all without really consulting anyone, without talking to people who know about that stuff, and people need to be very, very clever about how they approach that. If you figure out that you need to integrate that technology, that's going to really help you take your business to a next level, right? So be
Yep.
it operating a chatbot, or kind of doing the logistics, and predicting some consumer behavior online. But again, it comes with a lot of legal issues, and if you're not willing to tackle that right now, you might be very sorry later on, when another piece of legislation, maybe next year, but federal piece of legislation, a very comprehensive one, will just, befall you, and you'll be too late to address that.
Yeah.
Because a lot of businesses out there, in my previous discussions with them last year, even, they were very, I would say, blaze when it came to compliance with any type of regulations when it came to AI, right? And everybody was like, well, the EU AI Act doesn't apply to us, or it's not going to be here until 2026. So we have all the time in the world. So this mindset that we have all the time in the world, it needs to stop. You don't. You should
Yeah,
have started to do your homework yesterday.
I
That's where
agree
we
with
are
you.
right now.
I think that's the common philosophy or approach people have. One, it doesn't apply to us. Even before on the GDPR, we don't process personal data. That's the standard answer. And nowadays, oh, AI Act doesn't apply to us. They will try to look at one of the categories and say, we don't do it. But when you dig deep, like for instance, when you look at the definition of AI even in EU AI Act, it's very broad. And then it says go and refer to Annex 1 or Annex, I don't know, A. And when you read that one, then everything is AI almost. So that's so broad. And that's where companies and people have to understand. But I get your message. Don't be afraid of the FOMO. You're not going to miss out much. But be aware of the issues that you'll be taking along by not looking at legislation, or rather adopting or bringing in AI when you can do without it. And with that, if someone is interested in talking to you or getting into a conversation from business work perspective, what's the best way to contact you?
That would be, as of right now, my LinkedIn page. That's the best way. I'm constantly present on there. Message, just DM me, and you'll get in touch with me. And I'm almost done with my website. Finally, probably when
Mhm.
this episode comes out, it's gonna be on there. Yeah, it's just, I'm very particular about what I like. I could have used AI, obviously,
Yeah,
right? I could have just done this website in like 30 seconds. The truth is, I tried and I didn't like the results.
exactly.
So yeah, I want what I want, and yeah, hopefully soon it's gonna get there.
And also apply the medicine you give to others to yourself.
Exactly. I mean, you have to preach what you teach, right?
Yeah, okay. So with that, I would say, Elena, it was wonderful to have you have this conversation. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me, Punit.
Thanks for listening. If you liked the show, feel free to share it with a friend and write a review. If you have already done so, thank you so much. And if you did not like the show, don't bother and forget about it. Take care and stay safe. Fit for Privacy helps you to create a culture of privacy and manage risks by creating, defining, and implementing a privacy strategy that includes delivering scenario-based training for your staff. We also help those who are looking to get certified in CIPPE, CIPM, and CIPT through on-demand courses that help you prepare and practice for certification exam. Want to know more? Visit www.fit4privacy.com. That's www.fit4privacy.com. If you have questions or suggestions, drop an email at hello@fit4privacy.com. Until next time, goodbye.